Welcome to Eurofins Viracor Clinical Diagnostics Podcast, where I'll be sharing up-to-date scientific advances, key diagnostic testing, and our most recent innovations. Welcome to our podcast. This is episode 1 of our 10-part interview series, which was originally broadcast live on X Spaces from the showroom floor at ATC24 in Philadelphia. We exhibited as Eurofins Transplant, which is comprised of Eurofins Viracor, Eurofins Transplant Genomics, Eurofins Donor and Product Testing, Eurofins CellTX, and Ascend Clinical. All but a few of these interviews are hosted by Kevin Foth of Eurofins Viracor. For our first episode, we're joined by Eurofins Viracor President Michelle Altrich and Vice President of Sales and Marketing Rob Horel.
Good morning from ATC24 in Philadelphia. I'm Rob Horel. I'm the head of commercial for Eurofins Viracor, and I'm here today with our president, Dr. Michelle Altrich.
It's great to be with you, Rob. I think this is year 3 of us having a great time to converse about what's new at Viracor here for Transplant Radio.
Yeah, exciting to talk about that. In times past, I've always brought up some current events to get us going. It helps me get into the flow of this. I hope that it'll be entertaining for the audience as well. These are things that happened over the weekend while we were here at ATC representing our company and finding out a little bit about what's new in transplant. This is what's new in the world when we were here. So this country, for the first time ever, elected a female president. Who is it?
It is Mexico, and I think not only did they elect a female president, but they had multiple female candidates to choose from. And so I think, of course, as being a female leader, it's something I like to see, kind of the advancement of women in other parts of the world.
It's awesome. So she was also a Nobel Prize winner, a climate scientist, whatever that means to people today, but she's definitely gotten her PhD in the earth sciences, and she will follow in the footsteps of her mentor, according to her, who is referred to commonly as AMLO, the former president of Mexico. Speaking of AMLO, J-Lo canceled her concert tour this year, and the company that sets all of those up, that seems to have established a monopoly around the U.S. and the world for concert and venues, has just been hacked for the tune of about 560 million of its users. What company was that?
Yeah, so I don't know if the overall company is Live Nation or Ticketmaster, but I think it's kind of the latest in some challenges that they've had because they're the government is looking at the monopoly. Of course, we always hear more about the challenges some of these groups have, but it also raises, again, the diligence that every company always needs to be with their internet security and email. And I know it's one of the things that at Eurofins and Eurofins Viracor, we talk with associates all the time about checking to make sure you know who your email is from before you're clicking on any of those links.
And we, every month, it feels like, goes through some kind of training along that, and it's critically important to us. Right? We hold that information sacred. Ticketmaster's being taught a lesson, and by a really interesting hacking group called Shiny Hunters, who only want to sell this for $500,000.
Wow, which is really low.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're obviously just trying to stick it to Ticketmaster and Live Nation because the world feels like those folks have been sticking it to us.
Yep.
Although the average price of tickets has come down this summer. People are getting tired of concerts, but people are not getting tired of space launches. But the people that are trying to get into space right now are having some challenges. A good friend of mine, Sunny Pandia, well, I knew her as Sunny Pandia. Her name is now Sunny Williams, was set to launch into space on Saturday on this aircraft. What was it?
It was, I know for once it's not Boeing that's having the trouble, but it's the Starliner. And it wasn't the Boeing rockets. I think it was another related company that was having some challenges.
Yeah, these are millions of parts flying information into space, put together by a whole bunch of different companies. And in this instance, something that was triply redundant, the third computer just couldn't come up fast enough. It came up in 4 minutes prior to launch. They scrubbed. Hopefully they go on Thursday. I'm rooting for Sunny. There was some good news in space exploration this past weekend, though. China made it to the dark side of the moon.
Isn't that a Transformers movie?
They made it. They're the first to put a probe onto the dark side of the moon. It's going to be interesting to see what they come back with. That wasn't in your notes, by the way. But it does, the dark side of the moon brings me into studying things that people in times past have thought were very interesting and haven't really done anything with it until us now at this show, bringing a portion of the human virome, probably the biggest portion of the human virome, to bear in transplant medicine. So do you want to tell us a little bit about what we're doing with TTV and why we think it's important?
Yeah. So TTV, or tortenovirus, it's an interesting virus in that normally when we hear about viruses, we think bad. But this is a virus that doesn't kind of cause disease progression, but appears, the data that we've reviewed to be a good kind of gauge of how your immune system is doing. And so, of course, our immune system has developed to keep us healthy, keep the bad viruses, the bad bacteria away. If it gets too activated, we get autoimmune disease. But the TTV virus kind of is a gauge to say how is our immune system doing. And of course, that's vitally important in transplant patients because a transplant patient gets a donated organ from a different individual, so their body sees that as foreign. And so they have to be taking drugs generally for the rest of their life. And so the question is, are they on enough drug or too much drug? Because we know that if you're on too many immunosuppressions, you can get infections. If you're not on enough, you can reject your organ. And so it's been kind of a holy grail to try to understand that net state of immune suppression. So measuring TTV is another tool in that physician's toolbox to help monitor that. So we're excited. It's a test we launched yesterday. Today is Tuesday. Yesterday on Monday, June 3rd. And so really excited to just, again, give physicians those tools they need to give their patients the best outcomes possible.
It's really interesting because we all have it, at least the majority of us, right? So what a great sentinel to be able to tell us if immune suppression is working and at the right levels to truly titrate for a patient. And I remember in 2016, Steve Kleibacher coming to our Science and Technology Committee all the time talking about we've got to find a way to get tortenovirus into the hands of our clinicians to improve patient lives in the ways that we know that they can using this. It was a big deal, evidently, too, at ISHLT in Europe this year, early on in the year. And a lot of our clients came back asking. Fortunately, we've been developing well for about 8 years at this point and put it out there to bear. I think since we've been on some of the science fiction theme, I think of the sentinels in the Matrix. They go around and just pick up things. Something that can be a good indicator long before there's a problem. I think it's the right time, and I'm really excited to see how our clinicians respond to it and how it is actually used to improve patient lives like we really work to do every day. One of the challenges that we're all facing as laboratorians, especially somebody like us that has a depth and breadth of portfolio spanning well over 2,000 assays at this moment, we develop in our minds the very best test, right? And sometimes that means that we're not buying an FDA-approved or cleared assay that has already been developed and walked through the FDA process, but instead do something that we think is a little bit better better, maybe a little bit smarter, and certainly works a lot faster, because that's one of the tenets of why we do what we do, how we do it. LDTs, right? Laboratory developed tests. It's a big deal. It's been a big deal since 2011. Now it's a really big deal because it's going to become a reality that the FDA is going to monitor this. So if you would tell everybody a little bit about your thoughts on how we, in particular, are going to lead through that change and make sure that with confidence the assays that we're bringing to market, even as LDTs, are the very best things for their patients.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. And I think we have found a lot of times that because we have such a rigorous focus on quality at Viracor, that a lot of our tests are developed better than tests that we do run that are FDA approved. I mean, there's no test, of course, that's perfect, but you're right. So they published kind of some final guidelines on May 6th. It has come up with challenges and lawsuits, so I think the courts will continue to sort through things. But in the meantime, of course, we have started looking at the guidance and make sure we're doing everything to meet those guidelines. It's not something that scares us. It's just a matter of, time and money. And so, one of the good things is that they have built a fairly long implementation pathway. And so there are kind of triggers annually after May 6th that we will work towards. But I think a lot of the details still need to be understood and worked out. Of course, they publish guidelines, understanding kind of what reality is going to be, we will see over the coming months. But we are committed to making sure that our tests are continually available. One of the things that the guidelines has is they recognize kind of the rigorous program that the New York Department of Health has had over the years. And of course, being actually a global company, we've had New York certification, since the beginning of time, if you will. And so we send all of our tests through the New York Department of Health. So that will continue to be kind of a process. Of course, we are concerned that if people that haven't done that, everybody starts throwing stuff at New York, they will become overwhelmed. So that is something we will need to monitor. But we manufacture an FDA-approved kit, so we have kind of the rigorous quality systems that the FDA requires. We've already been getting FDA inspections, so we're familiar with that. So I think we've set ourselves up for success. I think, one of the things we need to make sure is that we're being good partners with some maybe labs that don't have the staff and the rigor to do this, and how can we kind of help them kind of through some of these processes.
Certainly, and we're beginning those dialogues today. How can we help? We're here for you. It is a great thing that every time we launch or bring a new product to market for the benefit of patients, we also go to New York and say, please approve this. It's going to be interesting to see how will New York respond to this, right? The FDA basically made them the flag bearer for bringing products through the LDT process that they're going to manage, making New York responsible for it. They might be overwhelmed. I think that's a really great point, and it's going to be real interesting to see how they respond to it. Especially if a lot of organizations have not used them in the past, or have not needed to, and now will. I'm assuming that the process is going to work. It is the government. We'll see.
Absolutely.
So we're here today at ATC and often at these conferences. While we're representing our organization, Viracor, we're operating under one brand umbrella of Eurofins Transplant. There's a number of organizations from now even pre-transplant in dialysis all the way through the points where we work, which is post-transplant, making sure that patients really get to retain that precious gift of that organ. In your mind, what is it that we do for Eurofins Transplant, and what is it that we get from being a part of that bigger brand?
Yeah. You're right. And I think when we come to these conferences, it gives us a really focused ability to remind the transplant community how broad Eurofins is in transplant and how we are committed to the patient every step of the way. And with the recent acquisition of Ascent, I think just over a month ago, I think as April turned to May, or maybe it was as March turned to April. Maybe it's been 2 months already. Time flies when you're having fun.
It was definitely the beginning of March.
Yeah. And so, they focus on kind of that patient with kidney disease that needs to go on dialysis and then becomes a transplant patient. So you're right, kind of pre-transplant, all the way moving into then donor and product testing that supports many of the OPOs. We've been able to collaborate with them to get that same pre-transplant testing offered for living donation in a lot of our transplant centers throughout the United States, to then, the successful transplant, and then of course all the management that patient needs after the transplant, which is primarily where we come in as our ViraCore core business, be it kind of the wide variety of infectious disease monitoring, therapeutic drug monitoring, immune assessment, but then, really giving to Eurofins Transplant with kind of the collaboration in DPT, and then kind of our other post-transplant company, Transplant Genomics, that really helps to understand kind of the health of that organ, and with the goal of, we've had a lot of focus on improving transplant numbers, but we really have to start as a community in those long-term outcomes. How can we get that gift of life, that kidney transplant, to last the life of the patient so they don't need another transplant? Because every time somebody needs a second transplant, it means somebody else didn't get a first transplant. And we all know there's way more people on the transplant waiting list than we have organs. And so, I think really being able to showcase the collective offering that Eurofins has in transplant, it's really great. And being able to have the various companies talk to physicians from a single center, and how can we really be that collective solution for the transplant center.
Right. To extend the life of the organ and to make sure that the patient doesn't just survive, but really thrives.
Right. Absolutely. Quality of life is critical.
I saw a really interesting stat in one of the plenary sessions, I think it was during the president's speech, that UAB just had one patient has been tracked over the years now to affect 128 other patients. And it's a new record in a transplant center. Really interesting statistic. I think, too, once a patient has been a transplant patient, how they're going to go on to improve the lives of others themselves at some point in time as well. As you were talking about that, you were looking up here.
Yeah.
For those of you that can walk by our booth at some point in time, we talk about it a bunch, to be on this patient journey every step of the way, a step ahead. And in our organization, we even talk routinely about being 2 steps ahead. How do we get to that place where we know confidently that we are well in front of any problem that a patient may have, and if they do experience anything that is a problem, that we can give them the right and best answer in the shortest amount of time possible. And one of those giant leaps that we have recently made, you and I have talked about it for the last 2 years that we've been here. When are we going to do this? I think it's critically important. We have finally done it. We have finally moved into bringing next generation sequencing to bear in transplant medicine. So if you could tell us a little bit about our current next generation sequencing panel, and how you continue to see the future of that developing for the benefit of patients.
Yeah, and I think you're right. So it's taken us a while to get there, but I think we wanted to really focus on doing it the right way, because next generation sequencing can be very powerful, but you can also get a lot of data that is irrelevant, and we know that you give physician data, they need to act on it even if it's not relevant. And so we took a very very focused approach in developing our next generation sequencing assay. The first one focuses on fungal and acid-fast bacteria. So really the most problematic types of pathogens to culture. Because of course, if you can get a $5 answer in 12 hours in the micro lab, you don't need these very expensive next gen tests. But so we focused on really the pathogens that are more difficult longer term to culture, but we also didn't take the kitchen sink approach. So we really said, in working with many expert physicians in the field, what is the list of pathogens that we should look for? And so we're doing really targeted NGS, and we think that really gives the physician better actionable data to look at. Of course, one of the other things that's always important is what specimen type are you testing. And so we started with looking at serum as a litmus test for kind of infections going around in any parts of the body. But we know in talking with a lot of physicians that a lot of the fungal challenges are in respiratory. And so we've been working diligently to expand the offering with BAL samples, and we're hopeful that test will be on the market later this year.
Very excited about that. We certainly have a lot of clients that have been asking for that as well, as people have started to use our next generation sequencing for fungal and bacterial. They have recognized that in that lung environment, there's a lot going on that is sometimes very difficult to culture. And if you're trying to get it one test at a time, very difficult to find out the answer.
Yeah.
And while it's critically important that we deliver the very best result in the shortest amount of time possible, next generation sequencing does take a couple more days, but it doesn't take 2 weeks.
Right.
And that has been one of the reasons that people have definitely latched on to launch. Well, I have certainly enjoyed our time together. As always, I look forward to this. Knowing that we have a few more hours here at ATC, I'd really love to find out, is there anything that you learned here that you want to make sure that you use, whether it's for this organization or just as a person concerned about transplant medicine and how you want to see it improved, or is there still something that you're looking for as you leave here you're still wondering about?
Yeah, so I've got a couple sessions on my agenda for later today. So at 1:30, there's a presentation on the top papers in Transplant ID, which is always great because it's hard to make sure you're keeping up with everything. So that session will, be the best of the best papers, and, we can understand, have we missed anything that we need to circle back on? And then later on, there's a session on donor-derived infection. So as we talk about kind of being that one-stop shop, are there things that are now becoming donor-derived infections that we can collaborate with DPT and saying, hey, there might be certain cases where you want to do some additional testing on the donor, so that the transplant team, it may not stop the transplantation, but it may inform the transplant team how better to take care of that transplant recipient to give them the best chance for the best outcomes. And so I've got some great things I'm going to get to yet today.
I really enjoyed our time yesterday with AST as well. And it was really great to hear. Thank you all for letting us be here, number one. We enjoy the relationship. It's really great to hear as they begin to think about the future. And really, that's, as leaders, that's something that we're really trying to craft, shape, and really well. And for them, while it's always and will remain about innovation, which for us is a principal core value, we innovate passionately. It is becoming increasingly so more about education, right? And we think a lot about how we not only educate physicians, but what's the potential to educate patients, so that the patient also is able to make the best informed decision for their transplant journey. and it was good to hear a little bit about that from them as well. And then also bringing in, recruiting the right physicians to do the right things and at the right time. I think following up from us right now, we're getting ready to hear from one of those who themselves is actually a transplant patient, which I can't think of a better calling to have been the recipient of that gift, and now to be working routinely with others in the medical community.
Having that true empathy.
Yep. Well, I've enjoyed our time.
Yeah, it's been great.
I look forward to talking with you more about the future the next time we get together. I guess maybe at World.
Yeah, San Francisco later in the summer next year.
Yeah,
the
excellent.
World Transplant Congress. Absolutely.
And I hope you travel home safely.
All right, you too.
Thank you. Take care.
Great.
Make sure to subscribe to this podcast and follow us on social media to stay up to date on all the latest information. If you want to help spread the word, please give us a 5-star review and tell your friends and colleagues to subscribe too. With over 40 years of diagnostic innovation and specialized expertise in infectious disease, pre- and post-transplant, allergy and immunology testing for immunocompromised and critical patients, Eurofins ViraCore is committed to helping medical professionals, transplant teams, and reference labs get results faster when it matters most. ViraCore is passionate about delivering value to our clients by providing timely, actionable information, never losing sight of the connection between the testing we perform and the patients you serve.